just a trial video. Okay.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Emerging Champions. Today, we have a special guest in Tawonga Chilundo. Women in Science. Tawonga is one of the best science students at Rhodes University, one of probably 3 to be given an academic honors in 2021. And she just finished the undergrad. She might be one of our frequent guests on this channel, especially on the panels we will be doing later on. But before we go to that, she had a promising career in writing and singing. She has received multiple awards with the National Institute of Allied Arts Zimbabwe from 2012 to 2014. From 2012 to 2014, she has received multiple first grade awards for the Prose and Poetry Awards. She received the Monash University International Writing Competition, second runner-up in 2015. She has also received Allied Arts Zimbabwe for singing, the most prominent being the National Institute of Allied Arts 2014 Ensemble Honors. However, Tawonga ended up coming to Rhodes University, where she has received multiple academic awards. I had a whole lot of science awards and scholarships to choose from, but I had to choose a few. She received the Investec Top 100 Award in 2018 and 2019, awarded to top 4 members in the science faculty for academic excellence. She has been on the Dean's list for the past 3 years. She has received multiple scholarships over the last 3 years for being a top science student at Rhodes University. If this was the United States of America, she'd be saying, "Oh, I've received $1 million in scholarship funds, etc., etc." Tawonga recently graduated in Biochemistry and Microbiology with distinction. She received the 2021 Moorhead Rosenberg Prize Award, which is received by a third-year top student in microbiology. She received the 2021 Academic Honors for graduating only having attained distinctions. Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Chilundo. Welcome to our episode today.
Thank you. That was a very flattering welcome.
Okay. No, you're welcome. Thank you. So, to start off, who is Tawonga Chilundo? What keeps you going every day?
Thank you. That's a great question. Okay. Tawonga Chilundo is a determined, driven scientist, writer, singer, friend, sister, daughter. Mm-hmm. What keeps me going is that I know where I've come from and have set goals for how I want to make sure that I get where I'm going.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So where do you come from?
So I was born in Harare, Zimbabwe, in a middle-class family. I'm the firstborn of 5. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Okay. So does being a firstborn put so much pressure on you, or do you feel like you have a chip on your shoulder? Do you feel like you have to prove something?
Not that I have to prove something, but it definitely does sort of like I have to set the pace and also have to pave the way so that my siblings have it easier than I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Perfect. Thank you for that. So, in your awards that you have received in the past, there's essay, there's prose, there's poetry writing. Did you do arts or humanities in high school?
For O-level, I did a mixture. I did arts and sciences, and then I took science. Well, I took sciences and arts for A-level as well.
Okay, okay, I've never heard that before, but, that's interesting. So what made you change to sciences in university?
Because the high school that I went to told me that I wasn't going to be able to be a scientist. So I had to prove them wrong.
Oh, okay, perfectly. So, why did they say that you were not going to be able to be a scientist?
I guess their standard. I don't know what the reason was, but maybe I didn't meet the standards that they wanted me to meet.
Okay, thank you. But, we're talking about science, writing, prose, poetry, and all this. But before we go to the science part, which is probably the most important part of this conversation with Ms. Chilundo, do you see yourself writing books in the future? What would you write about?
Yes, I would love to write books. There would probably be Christian fiction, but I also want to get into scientific writing. So writing for those journals that communicate what's happening in the science field.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, we'll come to that. So everything is tying together with the science field that she's involved in.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your favorite books and what key lessons are they?
My favorite book at the moment is The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. It's an important book because it kind of gives you the perspective. It's written from the perspective of the devil.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Oh, okay. Brilliant.
Yeah.
So what key lessons are you picking up from it?
That everything is connected. So even the small, insignificant things that you feel like don't really matter ultimately add up.
So what does the normal day look like for you?
These days, It looks like I go into the lab, I check my systems. I'm growing plants, so I have to check on the plants, make sure that everything is okay, process the data, so turn that into numbers and graphs, compare that to literature. If it's a Friday, then I go into the township because I'm a teacher there. So that's what I'll be doing.
Okay, so what are the time periods like? Is it like you go to the lab from 9 to 5? You teach from what are the time periods like? And what time do you study?
Yes, so it is 9 to 5. And then on Fridays, I teach in the township from 2 to 5. So that's every day. I don't study because I don't have exams anymore. So I don't have to study.
Okay. It seems like you're, I don't know, it seems like academic excellence comes with sacrificing a whole lot of things. Because, like I can barely do a 9 to 5, just in a lab or anywhere else. So, to hear that you are doing a 9 to 5 to check up on your research or, that's amazing. Okay, so, what are you researching on? You said you're growing plants. What is it about? What is it called?
So I'm studying hydroponics and bioponics, which is basically we're trying to grow plants, but we're not using any soil. So they're just floating in water. Then you supply that water with nutrients and oxygen, and then the plants are growing in that.
Okay. So if I may ask, what's the purpose of this research? What do you hope to find out from that? So
it uses less water, because the water is basically being recycled in the systems. So you don't have to keep watering every day. It's low maintenance. So once you plant it, the plants are just going to grow. Okay. Well, you do have to monitor a few key things. The ultimate goal is to be able to take this into impoverished communities and allow them to be able to grow their own food using fewer resources. Okay. All right. I'm going to come back to your research and this, but I think the most important thing that we are facing right now is COVID-19. Last year, COVID-19 was at its peak, and you managed to graduate with distinctions only and, get an academic honors. Probably, I remember looking at the graduation handbook. There were probably 3 people or 2 or 1, I'm not sure, but who managed to get an academic honors, and you're one of them. So my question is, what challenges did you face during this COVID-19 pandemic, especially last year? And how did you manage to, to stay grounded and, work hard and still manage to come out on top? Like, how did you do it? I could write a book about the challenges that I went through in 2020. But I guess to summarize, most of them were financial, because my mom primarily supports me and her job is commission-based. So because of the pandemic, she wasn't able to make as much money as she usually does. So I also had to be working part-time. How I stayed grounded, friends and family were very supportive. And also ended up in therapy because it was a lot. Yeah. So. Well, you mentioned your mother. It sounds like women, because we had a guest the other day, Miss Chimlonga, she mentioned women, a mother as well. It seems like women are actually doing a lot and contributing to their children's success and,
their children making it to the next level. Because, so basically women and mothers, they are raising generations, they're raising emerging champions, they're raising champions, or they've raised, champions. You mentioned about, you having to deal with, a lot of the challenges, but I think to see you here, you've faced challenges and you've overcome them.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you're still in the process, but it's good to see an emerging champion, who has faced adversity still be here. But okay, so let's move on to the sciencey stuff, to the sciencey stuff. Too bad I don't have my white coat. I should have worn something. But what is biochemistry and microbiology about?
Biochemistry is the chemistry of living systems, basically. So like how drugs interact with your body, for example, that would be biochemistry. Or how nutrients interact with plants. So yeah. Microbiology is the study of microbial organisms. So bacteria, viruses, fungi, those kind of things.
Okay. All right. So how do these science subjects relate to COVID-19? Do you feel like you as a scientist can make a contribution in fighting the COVID-19 pandemic or the virus?
Definitely. So things like the design of vaccines, how vaccines interact with your body, those all fall under biochemistry and microbiology. Do I feel like I personally can in my capacity as a scientist? Not at this present moment.
Okay.
Yeah. In other ways, yes, but not in my capacity as a scientist.
Okay. All right. So you told us what your project is about, what your research is about. So what's the best and worst case scenario?
Best case, the plants grow. Worst case, they die because the project doesn't work.
Okay. So, all right. So you're scared that it might not work, but you're looking forward to it happening. So what has been the most challenging part of the project and what have you learned from it?
The most challenging part was optimizing the project so that the plants actually do grow, but not only grow, but grow to the best of their ability. So that means making sure that the nutrients stay at the right level. So those kind of things, because it's new research, you can't just reference a textbook. You kind of have to figure it out as you go. So yeah, that's the challenging part.
So what is optimizing the project? Is it like starting the project?
So starting and then adjusting things like pH, adjusting the amount of water or the flow of the water.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So what would be your dream project and why?
My dream project, in terms of like what I'm doing right now,
or in terms of like biochemistry, or right now you're doing a specific project,
yeah.
But is it your dream project or do you have a dream project after this?
Okay. Yes, I do have a dream project, which is that, ovarian cancer or, yeah. So there's a cancer that can be caused by HIV and AIDS, which is similar to the cancer that's caused by the HPV virus. So it's not a well-studied cancer. But it can then develop into ovarian cancer or cervical cancer. So that is something that I would want to. So it's because obviously HIV is epidemic to the Southern African region. And we don't have a lot of research going on here. So I definitely think it's a worthwhile project.
Brilliant. Okay. So how do you intend to do this? Do you intend to study or look at that type of cancer through a research council, through a university? How do you intend to go about this project? Because like you mentioned, this epidemic, this HIV epidemic is affecting us in Southern Africa, and so how do you intend to go about this research?
I think it's important I would like to do it at a university because they provide the facilities, but in such a way that is collaborative with with other universities, perhaps in the Western, Eastern, Northern regions, because they have the facilities, but are also pretty open to helping us as Africans kind of get to the level that they're at.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. So, okay. So, with your line of work or your line of studies, there's a lot of lab work. So in the lab, what are you really good at and where could you improve?
What I'm good at maths. I love working with numbers. I'm really good at converting data. Where could I improve at? I could be a bit more accurate, I guess, in terms of like the measurements and stuff. Sometimes I just want things to happen quickly and it doesn't happen quickly enough for me.
Oh, okay. All right. Brilliant. Okay. So what area of biochemistry do you find interesting and why?
I find immunology interesting just because I think the way that the human body is designed.
Okay. Wait. What is immunology?
Immunology is the study of how your body responds to diseases.
Oh, okay.
So I think the human body is so well designed. Like when it gets infected, the way it responds is so coordinated and planned. It's like it's like a military response. It's so incredible to me.
Oh, okay. All right. So immunology. Okay. That's a new word for me. So what would you like to accomplish as a biochemist?
For me, ultimately, my goal is to change healthcare, the way that healthcare is viewed in my home country, Zimbabwe. I think that there are basic things where in Zimbabwe, if you get certain kind of illnesses, you have to be flown outside of the country to get things that are basic treatment in other countries. So I would love to be part of a community that is revolutionizing what medicine looks like in Zimbabwe.
Okay, brilliant. You've just given me an idea for a panel, because the thing is, we're going to look at later on in one of the episodes. We're going to look at if a nation building. So we just sit around the table and then we'll discuss what it would be like if you were the new president of a post-colonial African state. What policies are you bringing onto the table? What are you bringing to your people and whatnot? But which relates to you, let's say you're the president of Zimbabwe or you're the minister of health in Zimbabwe. What policies are you going to address? What are you mentioned, that was a brilliant insight, by the way, what you aim to accomplish as a biochemist. You mentioned that you want to bring in a different understanding of how health is perceived in Zimbabwe. That is something that you want. And what, if you're a president or maybe minister of health, what would you like to bring onto the table? Maybe one more thing as well, because you just gave us a brilliant insight. Yeah.
I think one way that we can bring sort of medicine into Zimbabwe is to open up the country to clinical trials. I'm not sure if that's something that actually happens in Zimbabwe, but once you have people that are the scientists that are doing their work, starting to see Zimbabwe as a potential client and starting to getting to the hospitals, it'll also help. It'll also motivate us to change the infrastructure. If we know that we have this European company, they have this new drug and they can test it out in Zimbabwe. I feel like that's a first step of many.
Ladies and gentlemen, an emerging champion of women in science. This is brilliant. This is something that I've never thought about. So that's why it's always important to have, professionals in a specific field or people who know about a specific field to lead that specific field. So this is a brilliant insight, and thank you so much. Maybe you can be the next Minister of Science in Zimbabwe, or maybe you can be the next head doctor at Parirenyato Hospital in Zimbabwe. You never know, but it's always good as an emerging champion to have such aspirations. So what career paths are there in biochemistry other than being a biochemist?
You could become a teacher. You could become a writer. You could go into forensic science. You could go into other areas of research. So you could even study, I know there's this paper that I read, they're basically astronauts and they're trying to figure out how we can grow food in outer space for astronauts.
Oh, okay.
This kind of thing.
All right, thank you. You mentioned a lot right now, but I just want. Okay, let's take us a little bit back. You mentioned your mother. I know probably your mother is one of your role models, but who is your role model? Is it still your mom?
Yeah,
and
it's
why?
definitely my mom.
Why?
My mom is someone that is always willing to try. No matter what the risk is, whether it's in business, whether it's in school, my mom will always try. She fails. Sometimes she succeeds, but she'll always try, which is kind of my motto as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So, one thing I've liked about this part of the conversation is that you mentioned a lot of trying, a lot of trial runs. Previously, when I asked you about you being a minister or president in Zimbabwe, you mentioned, I don't know, clinical trials, or I don't know this exact word. So it seems like, this profession or this, biochemistry, it involves a lot of trial and error.
Definitely.
So how would you go about it? Let's say in trial and error, do you think, let's say there's a clinical trial and it goes bad, what's the next step forward? So let's say, remember with COVID, there had to be like clinical trials and whatnot. So what happens if, let's say, clinical trial goes bad? So what's the next step after that?
So they have what are called adverse effects. The trial is stopped immediately. It depends on how bad the effects are. But usually by the time that a drug gets to clinical trials, there's been a lot of testing that has gone through it. But if it goes bad or the drug is unsuccessful, then they just stop the trial. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Brilliant.
Okay. So in your undergrad, you talked about you like immunology. Yeah, immunology. Okay. So what area did you find difficult during your undergrad?
Bioinformatics. I'm not really good at the whole coding and understanding computers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So is bioinformatics similar to statistics, and what is it about?
Bioinformatics is trying to turn biological systems into something that your computer can understand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Brilliant. Thank you. So, okay, you told us about your role model being your mother. So what do you look up to in the science world, and why? Or be it a professor?
Prof. Newcong. She's in the chemistry department. I look up to her because she's a Black woman in a white male dominated field, revolutionizing nanotechnology, bringing it not just to South Africa, but to Africa, to the world. She's literally changing the way that we view nanotechnology in the world here in South Africa, in the Eastern Cape, as a Black woman.
Okay, I think there are probably people who don't know what nanotechnology is. Do you mind just giving us just a simple explanation?
Nanotechnology is studying particles that are really, really tiny, and how you can use those to give targeted therapies, for example. So using a nanoparticle, we put it inside your body and it can go directly to the cancer cells, for example.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. All right. So another question. If a minister of higher education, science and technology in South Africa, what would you improve in the field of sciences? And what is lacking and what are you happy with?
I would make it more accessible. Accessible in terms of the prospects. I feel like in Africa, when you get a science degree, your options are limited because we don't have a lot of research institutes. So a lot of people that are in science end up in as academics. Yeah. So I think improving prospects, probably building new research institutes, but also just partnering with other research institutes and maybe helping them to bring science to Africa and stuff like that. Science is very collaborative in that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is this something you would do if you were like, let's say, a dean of science or a head of department, let's say in biochemistry or chemistry? Is it the same thing? Would you want to collaborate with more institutions? Or like, is it the same thing you would, let's say, if you're an HOD or a dean of science?
Yeah, definitely, because Rhodes is in a small town, which means that we're kind of in a box. So we're different from bigger universities where you have much closer access to other research institutions and stuff. So if we can have that collaborative nature where maybe as a third year student, you would be able to be placed in a research institute and be able to actually take part in real world science, as opposed to having to wait to honors, which is already so competitive to get into in the first place.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So, okay. So you mentioned about, bringing science to Africa, it being dominated by white males. Can we decolonize science? And is it colonized? Can we decolonize it? And what would a decolonized science field look like?
It definitely can be decolonized. Language is the first and I think most obvious answer would be science is inaccessible to a lot of people because there's so much jargon involved in it. So if there was a way for us to be able to break that down, I mean, we've seen the Germans do it. We've seen the French do it. We've seen even Afrikaans, speakers doing that and breaking it and bringing it closer to home. So if we could be able to actually bridge that gap and create and make science more accessible to maybe the person who doesn't speak very good English. Yeah.
Wow. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. So lastly, science and business. You have a business. Do you mind just telling people what your business is about?
My business is I make skincare products, organic skincare products, from African ingredients. Yeah.
Yes. So, okay. So the reason why is because I know you have a brilliant business, but how do we link science? How can you link science and business together? Do you need an MBA for that? Are you going to do an MBA for that? But how can you link science and business? Do you think it can go hand in hand?
It definitely can go hand in hand. I do personally want an MBA, but I don't think you necessarily need an MBA. But just because I feel like I'm not naturally inclined to business is why I would want an MBA. But science and business is a field of study called biotechnology, which is actually offered here at Rhodes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Brilliant. Okay. So lastly, wow, an emerging champion, women in science, Tawonga Chilundo. It has been brilliant having you here. So what does the future hold for Miss Tawonga Chilundo?
A lot. I'm gonna be great. I'm an emerging.
Whoa, thank you. You know what? Thank you so much. I would like, I think probably this can be an end to a very captivating conversation with Ms. Tawonga Chilundo. Please follow, like, subscribe, and we'll put the details of Ms. Tawonga Chilundo's business in the description below. We'll put it social media handles in the description below. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope for the best for an emerging champion, women in science, Ms. Tawonga Chilundo. Cheers.
Thank you.